Hello and welcome back. So if you've been following the channel, you may or may not know that I was not at all confident in my goaltending coming out of the draft. So I ended up with Tristan Jarry, who I do like, Mackenzie Blackwood, and then Matt Murray. If you want to know why that happened, I went over that in detail in my draft recap video. You can check that out. But after week one, despite a nice 7-2 win against Toe Dragons, I absolutely need to address my goaltending situation. But before I dive into the solution, and Fantasy Puck did help with that solution, let's first get into the problem. So these were the first 4 rounds of my THHL draft, which I did mention in that draft recap video. And what you see in green are the goalies that were taken before my pick in the 4th round with Tristan Jarry right here. So what you see at the bottom was from my video about not picking goalies in the top 2 to 3 rounds. And those were the players in my league who did that last year. And that's where they finished as a result. So as you can see, I was shocked to see Portland Rivercats go back to Vasilevsky in the 1st round. And it was a pretty funny moment during the draft. But nonetheless, these 3 guys ignored that advice right off the bat. And then by the time, I obviously had the 1st overall pick. McDavid is the clear front runner there. You could maybe make the argument for Draisaitl, but this league does not have face-off wins, so I didn't care about that. Just got to go with McDavid. But then by the time I make my 2nd pick, so these 3 guys are off the board, so they ignored the advice and took goalies in the 1st and 2nd round. So here I'm looking for my elite number 1 defenseman. So I grab Aaron Ekblad there. And with David Pastrnak available at 25th overall, it just fell right into my lap. I had to do that. But that means I have to wait 23 picks until the 4th round to get my first goaltender. And then look what happens in between that time. So right after Pastrnak, Sorokin's taken, and then Markstrom, then Anderson and Saros, Kemper, Demko. This could be seen as the goalie run. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goalies taken in 2 rounds. I ended up taking the 7th in these 2 rounds. So, but the point is, by the time I got to this 4th pick, 48th overall, 9 goalies were taken already. All of these guys that I mentioned, these were my G1s that I was targeting, and we mentioned that in the goaltending targets video. These were the guys that I was looking at. Shesterkin gone, obviously. Markstrom, Anderson, Sorokin, Kemper, Saros, Vasilevsky, Ottinger, Demko, all gone by the time that I need my G1. Now, as I'm looking at this list, Jarry is the clear favorite and the front runner. This is why he's the best pick. And we mentioned this in the goaltending targets video. These were the goalies that met the criteria in that video for a G1. Minimum 50 starts on a team that wins 40 plus games and a team with a top half defense and a save percentage over .915. So that list on the right consists of the goalies who met that threshold. And obviously by this point in the draft, the only one that was left was Tristan Jarry. And I mentioned him in that video as the highest value option, or maybe at least the lowest ADP option. And that played out in my draft as I got him 48th overall. But I was very happy about that, considering this analysis and just showing that Tristan Jarry was an excellent option last year and for several years in the past. Now, as we get back to the next part of the problem, I have my G1. I feel good about that. Then I have to grab, I picked right up here at 4. So at 5, I grabbed John Carlson. He dropped to me as well. I consider him an equal to Aaron Ekblad, and to find him available 49th overall, I just had to do that. But now I have my 2 Elite D, my G1, and then I also have McDavid and Pastrnak. So I'm feeling really nice there. And then I go for goal-scoring wingers in Line and Caulfield, and I still feel good about that. And then I grab my D3 and D4 before addressing my G2. And the reason I didn't jump on a goalie sooner, I needed some high-end dual-eligible wingers, especially guys with high goal ceilings. So right now, Yahoo Plus is currently putting me at 11th in the league in left wingers, mainly because I don't have a single position left winger that's not currently on IR. I did stash Pacioretty, but right now, Line and Caulfield are acting as my left wingers. So I kind of needed them for that. And then if I hadn't gone Line and instead I went G2, I would have missed out on some offensive punch, and my goaltending options weren't that great. So it's Georgiev, Forsberg, Binnington, Samsonov, and basically everyone else you see down here in green. And I didn't think any of them warranted being that high of a pick. So with Georgiev, you get some of that. Definitely a good team, going to get you lots of wins, but Georgiev has never been a number one, and he had an .898 save percentage last year. He's also coming to a new team and adjusting to a new defense, and all of that combined was a little bit too much risk for me to take a 6th round or 7th round pick on him. Now, I love Anton Forsberg as a G3. I had him for points in the season last year. Definitely worth it at that point, but definitely not a G2 in my mind in the 7th round, especially considering that that's a young defense that was 6th worst in the league in shot suppression last year and didn't make any material changes other than adding Jake Sanderson. So they're not that much better, and that defense is not something I want access to. Then you look at Binnington, who was available for me in that 6-7 range, but if you watched that goaltending targets video, you saw me kind of just throw him into that G1 list at the very end, and the only reason was because of the team exposure. So he had a very bad year last year, 37 games played, .901 save percentage, 3.1 goals against, 2 shutouts, and 18 wins. So that's basically backup numbers, bad backup numbers at that. And I just simply couldn't reach for him there. If he were available around my 8th pick, maybe that's something I entertained, but he was gone by that point as well. And then if you watch my draft recap video, I addressed why I went with Blackwood and Murray. I'm willing to admit that was a terrible decision. I didn't feel confident about it at the time, and all of that went out the window in just 1 week as Blackwood, and more importantly, the Devils looked like shit, and then Murray looked like shit, and then immediately got injured and went on the IR for 4 weeks. So now the problem is this. I do have an excellent offense and a D-core for sure, good enough to potentially compete for a championship, but I need to find a solution in net. Otherwise, I'm going to waste this entire season. This is where the guys at Fantasy Puck come in. So here I'm watching the Week 2 preview from Fantasy Puck, just checking it out after I made my video. I don't want to use the same ideas or anything, so I try to watch it after the fact. And then I see Casey DeSmith here, and he was projecting that DeSmith was going to get this start against Montreal. And that kind of triggered something for me. And I thought to myself, what about Casey DeSmith? And that made me think of another Fantasy Puck video. And this was done a lot earlier in the preseason, the one-team goalie draft strategy video. I actually liked this video at the time. I commented on it because it's a strategy that I've used before, but I've used it for my G2 and G3 in terms of a tandem, handcuffing 2 guys from the same team. And I mentioned that in my videos talking about guys like Swayman and Ullmark, guys like Quick and Peterson in LA, the top defensive teams using those goaltenders as your G2, G3. But what this video is talking about is more using your G1 and G2 as this handcuff situation and then just streaming a G3. And they go through a list of all the different tandems that if you had access to them, this is what you would have gotten over the course of the season. And that, that kind of strategy, you do need to make sure that you're playing the waiver wire game and getting that G3. But if you can do that, it's actually a very effective strategy, more effective in head-to-head categories, as they mentioned. And so that's something that just kind of struck me like a bolt of lightning. And I'm like, I have Tristan Jarry. Why not go get Casey DeSmith? And then if you think about it, the reasons that make Jarry so solid also make DeSmith solid. So Pittsburgh was 14th in the league last year in shots against, 15th the year before that, and then 6th in the league in 1920. And it's worth mentioning that they're usually pretty riddled with injuries. And last year, a lot of their top guys missed some time. Crosby missed a little bit. Rust missed about 20 games. Malkin missed half the season. Zucker missed about half the season. But they still stayed relatively defensively sound. And then in addition to that, they had the second best combined save percentage in the league behind only the Rangers, who were floated by Igor Shesterkin's .935. So if you just look at the 2 goalies combined as opposed to Igor and Georgiev in that situation, the Pittsburgh Penguins were incredibly good at a combined team save percentage, which means both goaltenders were definitely worth owning in fantasy hockey. Now, quickly, if you want to access any of these charts that I'm going to use, I have these 2 and one more coming up. You can find those in the description below in the Patreon link. For just $3 a month, you can get access to everything you see on the channel. And for $5, you get all of that and access to our community Discord chat. And again, you can find those in the description below under the Patreon link. But as you can see here, Pittsburgh is very solid defensively. And I view the Penguins more as that 6th overall defense when they're completely healthy. And then they added some pieces in the offseason to help bolster their D-core. So let's take a look at their defense and Casey DeSmith. So if you look at their top 4, They ship out Matheson, they bring in Jeff Petrie, and that will help their goaltending as well. If you look at Petrie's hits and blocks numbers, that's definitely what you like to see in front of your goalie. In terms of the rest of the defensemen, lots of hitting, lots of blocks going on, and what that tells me is that Pittsburgh is willing to clear the front of the net, play good defense in their own end, and limit rebound chances, and that helps your goaltenders. If they're not facing tons of rebounds, if they're not getting quality shots from the inside, that definitely helps your goaltenders perform better in fantasy hockey. It is a small sample size this year, but he's put up a .923 in that first game. They should have won that game. A really nice game-tying goal by Cole Caulfield, who I also own. So that was a kind of a bittersweet moment. At least he was the one who scored it. But nonetheless, as we move forward, what you saw from this goaltending tandem last year was something to get very excited about. So Tristan Jarry was 11th in the league in goals saved above expected, and he had fantastic numbers fantasy-wise. So 34 wins, 242 goals against average, 919 save percentage, and 4 shutouts. But then you look at DeSmith. He's a career .915 goalie. Last year, 11 wins and 24 starts, .914 save percentage, and 3 shutouts. Now, the shutouts first showed up in the data when I was looking at my 21-22 goaltending dashboard and saw this. So this is shutouts per start ratio, and what jumps out to me aside from Anthony Stolarz, look where DeSmith is. He's all the way at the top, third best in the league in this metric. And this tells me that both Jarry and DeSmith are comfortable with that defense, and that defense is comfortable with them, either of them, in net. So, Mike Sullivan's defensive system, it seems to work out well for these two. And if you've owned them last year, you would have gotten 80 starts, 45 wins, a .916 combined save percentage, and 2.6 goals against. But the other part of this is that Pittsburgh, arguably got better. And if they can stay healthier than they were last year, adding, Kapanen, they still brought over Rickard Rakell at the trade deadline last year and then re-signed him. Then they added Jeff Petrie to the mix. So they're adding some more pieces, and they're a very competitive team. A lot of people, including the betting odds markets, are putting them in the top 2 or 3 in the division. So they are likely going to be a playoff team. And so this is kind of something that you definitely want access to if you're in my situation. Now, again, the key component to this strategy, as they mentioned in that Fantasy Puck video on this, you do have to find a streaming goalie option every week for your G3, or find someone who gets hot and you can stick with. But this process is getting easier and easier to do with all of the incredible fantasy hockey content out there right now. Between my channel, Fantasy Puck, Fantasy Tipped, Cherry Pickin', the list goes on and on. But these channels can give you the edge when it comes to fantasy hockey and finding that G3 to help you roll out this particular goaltending strategy. So that's what I'm going to have to do going forward, is stream that G3. Now, I don't know if this actually will save my fantasy season, but this idea was definitely the best path forward given my situation, and for that I need to thank Fantasy Puck for the light bulb moment that led me to this. But yeah, hopefully you got some value out of this as well. If you want to roll out this strategy, if you're in a situation like I'm in where you're not happy about your goaltending, maybe take a look at some of the dashboards I've created and look at the team defense and see if you can pick up, if you have one of these goaltenders, if you can pick up the other one, and if their team defense is above top half in the league, that's definitely going to help you out and help you find a little bit more consistency in net. But hopefully you got some value out of this. If you made it to the end of this video, I want to thank you for sticking with it, and I'll see you in the next one.